everyone, it's great to see you. Today I am going to be winterizing the hydrangeas that I had in the bags in the pot throughout last year. They did great, and I really felt that this method gave them the optimal bloom production that they could have. So I'm ready now to bring these into the shed. Today is December 8th here in zone 6B, and December 1st tends to be about the date that I look for this. I'm looking to have my hydrangea really go dormant, which means that they look dead. So all their leaves have fallen off, their blossoms are all brown, they look like a bunch of twigs, and that is exactly what you want. Now when your hydrangeas go dormant, they don't need a lot. They don't need sun, they need very little water. They're really sleeping for the winter. So I've taken all my bags out of the pots, and now I need to clean them up before I put them in the shed. There's some debris in the bottom of each, some leaves that fell from other trees, some of the old hydrangea leaves. I don't want to overwinter those. Those could have disease, they could have powder mildew that's harboring there, or they just could get a little damp when I water them, and they could grow some mildew or mold in my shed, and I really don't want that. So I want these to be cleaned up, just of the dead pieces. So any spent blossoms like this, I'm just going to deadhead. If there are any dead leaves stuck on, most of them have fallen off, and the ones that haven't, I can just sort of real easy pluck off. They come right off. It's not a big deal. And then I get rid of those separately. This is not a time to prune the hydrangeas. This is just a time to really clean them up before they go away. Okay, so I'm gonna get started on that. Now that these are dormant, they really do look like they've died. So we have a lot of dead leaves that have collected in the bottom here. And I'm just going to be really careful as I get these out because I don't want to break any of the branches. Some of these bloom only on old wood, so they've already set buds for next year. Those are the buds coming for next year. So you can see how they're already here. This is what we want to be very careful about and protect. Some of these bloom on old and new wood. So if I did break them off, or if they get caught in a frost, it's not the end of the world. However, I want as many blossoms as possible. So I'm really going to be careful. I have a number of the hydrangeas that look like this one. This really is pretty clean. I don't see any real dead leaves hanging on here. This one is good to go. Then I have some hydrangea that look like this. So you can see, I mean, these leaves, they're really dead, but they're hanging on here. However, they just I hardly have to tug on them. They come right off. So I'm just gonna get rid of those. They don't need to overwinter. I'm not pruning, I'm just plucking off the dead leaves. And if there are any that really don't want to come easily, I do snip them. I'm going to take off this dead blossom, and you can see it just crumbles in my hand. Another week or two out here, and the wind would probably just take care of this on its own. But I'm just giving it a little help. So you can see this one looks pretty good now. There aren't a lot of dead leaves down the bottom. There's maybe a couple, but that's okay. I've really plucked off all of the dead leaves that are hanging on the branches. There were a couple of branches that were a little broken, so I took those off. And you can tell there are some buds here. We're going to be really careful, and we're going to put this one in the shed. This particular planter has two of the little cuttings that I had taken earlier. So this type of hydrangea might go in the ground, but because it's their first year, I want to give them that extra protection. They're pretty small here. So I am just going to make sure that they don't have the dead leaves here, and these will be overwintered. And they look like they're doing well. Now I notice here that there's actually just a little bit of mold starting on the top. If you notice that, you just want to take it out. There we go. And now they're all set. So looking at this one, this looks pretty good. I see a lot of buds here. I do see some of these dead leaves at the bottom and some dead leaves that are just hanging on. So I'm just gonna pluck those right off, but not many of them. That's great. So it's really dormant now. When a plant is dormant, it really doesn't need a lot of water. So I have not been watering these. These have been sitting outside. We've had some regular rain showers, and you actually don't want to put them in your shed super damp because you don't want any of the roots rotting. A dormant plant, because it's not actively growing, doesn't need as much water as it would need. We know hydrangeas need a ton of water in the growing season, but maybe throughout the winter, I'll check on them once a month and maybe give them half a cup to a cup of water. That's it. And I'll touch their soil. If the soil is damp, I won't even do that. Right now, the soil is nicely damp. I'm not adding anything to these before they go in the shed. So this one has some blossoms to be deadheaded. Oh, there we go, and I'll clip those off. It has a number of dead leaves at the bottom and lots of what look like these dead sticks here. Now for zone 6B, I am really just going to be overwintering macrophylla hydrangea in my shed. Your other types of hydrangea should be fine outside. They will bloom on new wood, and I'm not even going to trim mine up right now. I just let them overwinter. But the macrophylla are the ones with the big blossoms that sometimes in the late spring get hit by a frost. Now, I haven't been worried about these. We've had some frosts because as they go dormant, they're not putting out that new growth that could potentially be killed off. So it's okay, actually, probably for another month or so outside here. These would just be sleeping, and yeah, we get the cold on them, that's okay. What you're really protecting them from is in March when it starts to warm up and you start to see these babies leaf out, and their buds, which are just starting here, will start getting bigger and they'll start to really put on new growth on those buds. That's when you can get that late March frost that comes through and kills them. Right now, the frost is not going to hurt those new buds that it has put on. It really is fascinating. Macrophylla tend to want to bud out too early here in zone 6B. So they're the ones that we worry about. But right now, they're doing just fine. For some of these, even if they stay in the ground and you don't bring them inside, they will be just fine also. It's just those that like the slightly warmer weather, or maybe we need to protect them from the wind. If you're in a really windy area, the wind can actually hurt those new buds in March a lot too. So the shed will give them the protection it needs. It always amazes me that even though my shed, I pull the blind so they're not going to get any sun, and come spring, the hydrangea know that it is spring, and they will start to grow and put out their leaves even in the dark.
And you said that the frost now won't kill the buds, that's because the buds are not set yet?
So the buds are, maybe they've started a little bit, but they're really not really blooming and full enough to be hurt yet. Here's City Line Vienna. City Line Vienna got too wet when I took it in last year, and when I took it out in the spring, I thought I was going to lose it because it looked like it had a lot of rot on it. And I took out some of those branches and it came back. So that is one of my reminders that even with the best of intentions, I watered it a little bit too much in the winter. They don't need a lot of water. So even though these look like buds here and they're the start of new growth, you really haven't had the growth that you're going to get at the beginning of the summer where the blossoms start, the buds really start to grow and they're really putting on that growth there. So right now, that's why you're not going to have the damage as much from the winter weather. But as soon as they start to grow a little bit in the spring, that's when you really have the danger of those buds getting too cold and not being able to bloom. This looks pretty good. Okay. Here we have Wee Bit Giddy. Wee Bit Giddy, if you remember, my bag in the pots did amazing last year. And I had it in a pot. Oops, and I just broke a branch. You have to be careful with these branches. It just thrived and had a ton of blossoms. So I decided I would keep it in the bag another year, even though Wee Bit Giddy is a variety that probably would do okay over the winter. It does bloom on new and old wood. So I know that if we had a late freeze, I would still get some blossoms. I have 3 of these in the ground actually, and they did bloom. They didn't bloom as well as the one that I put into the shed, but they bloomed a little bit later and with some fewer blossoms. They still did really, really well. So I'm thinking maybe another year in the shed for this one in a pot, and then maybe I'll move it to the ground. I like having them in pots. So to tell you the truth, it's so nice just being able to move them around, especially when they're at their peak, really showing them off. And then when they're not looking their best, you can hide them and put something else in there, which is fabulous. Okay, Wee Bit Giddy looks good. Put that stake back in there. Okay, here's another one. So this one has another one of my cuttings. This is just a little baby here. So we're going to take out everything else that is in the planter. I had some other plants in here. And next year I might put it in a different pot, but for now I'm just going to leave it just like it is. Okay, this was a gift hydrangea. And I talked about gift hydrangeas. So these are the ones that often come from florists, or you see them in grocery stores. And those florist type hydrangeas often do not overwinter well in the ground. They were meant for their beautiful blossoms, and often they want the warmer weather. So I don't even know if this one will really make it bringing it in, but I figured it was worth a try. And once again, I had other things in here before which have been pulled. Okay, here is another cutting. This is a cutting from my purple hydrangea plant that I don't know what kind it is, so I can't go out and buy another one, but I love it. And the cutting did really, really well. Now there's a couple, oops. That's what you do with the leaves. They're ready to defoliate because it is going to sleep. You don't even have to cut them. In here, I had some other plants, annuals. I had a hosta. Now you can overwinter hosta in pots also. Usually if I just have hostas in the pots, I leave the pots outside and they do fine. But this one will come in. Okay, here's my last one. I think I'm being attacked by the one behind me. This looks great. I mean, this is exactly how you are hoping that they have dropped all their leaves by this time. Completely defoliated. It's cleaned out. This is wedding gown. It looks great. That was a dead branch. And they are all set to go inside. So I'm going to carry them in now. So here I have 14 bags or pots with hydrangea in them that are going to stay here for the winter. So I'm not worrying about the sunlight. They're fine if it's pitch black. I am going to check on them about once a month for the watering, just to make sure they're slightly damp. They don't really need a lot. They are dormant. If they need it, I might give them 1 cup of water about a month. That's it. Until March, when I start to maybe let them come out in a nice day and come back at night, I actually don't move them outside until about May 1st. So it is a long time that these babies are going to live in here. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.